any big game, John?
Did I get any what?
Big game.
No, but
I know you're practicing your arrow game. So
yeah. So the big news for me this fall is that my dad, who's 85, who's like the complete, Ernest Hemingway guy. He used to hunt grizzly bears with longbow and his homemade arrows. And so Janice knows my dad. He's a character. Anyway, he can't even walk anymore, but he fortunately got his tag, his elk tag this year. And so he told the family that he's definitely going to go elk hunting this year. And we were a little worried about that. So I decided to go with him. Last time I bow hunted, so I bought a bow, I'm going to go with him. Last time I bow hunted was with my dad, 150 miles north of the Arctic Circle. And Dean, you've been there up by Bettles, right? So we were on the John River in Bettles by ourselves, hunting grizzly bear and caribou. And
it's the wild and scenic John River.
It is the wild and scenic John River these days, right?
Let's discuss
40 years ago.
Let's discuss hunting near the wild and scenic John River in the future.
Okay, that sounds good. I'd love to do that. The one quick story there is like, we dropped the plane in there and got dropped off. And first morning we were there, my dad being quite the hunter, me being right out of college, scared half to death. And we're kind of packing up our canoe and all of a sudden this big grizzly bear comes walking down the sandbar and I'm scared shitless. My dad's like, grab the bow, shoot the grizzly. And I'm throwing my shit in the canoe going, I'm getting out of here, man. I'm getting out of here. We almost tipped the canoe over. The bear was charging us through the water. It was super crazy. So anyway.
I thought you were going to tell your other bear story. The fact that you have multiple grizzly bear stories, that's just wrong.
Well, I don't know. It's like they keep me cloistered here in the West. Don't let me out of the West very much. So it's like I'm wearing a new hat today, 1950s Stetson. Check it out. I'm super psyched with it. I was telling John and Steve, we were up we have a family ranch up in northern Wyoming. We stopped by a antique shop in Meeteetse, and you walk in and I've never stopped there before. And you walk in this antique shop, and the craziest thing is that the door is so full of shit that there's like 150 cigarette butts out on the the landing where Cowboy John flicks his cigarettes out the door, and it's just like the stuff just piles of clothes and art, and he essentially takes all the old rancher stuff in bags of plastic bags. And we were asking him, well, how's it going lately? And he's like, well, it's crazy. This guy, Kanye West, bought a ranch about an hour away in Cody, and he sends all his designers down here, and they just buy them by the dozen. Like, they'll buy big bags, and it's awesome. Business is great. So expect some fashion from Meeteetse here in the latest Yeezy line out of Paris.
That is insane, John.
By the way, I think that accent was probably top notch. That was probably some of the best accent work I've ever heard.
Oh, thanks.
How many skills do you have, John?
Yeah,
that's not fair. How many skills do you have? That's not fair. You can't have all the skills in the world.
Skills? I don't have many skills.
Exactly.
That's when you're up at the ranch and you're trying to. The big project of the ranch was trying to down a bunch of widowmakers. Does anybody know what a widowmaker is? Yeah, they're kind of
a branch
trees
that'll hit you on the head.
Yeah, they're like trees that lean against another tree that's dead, right? And so we were working on that, and the guy that kind of manages our ranch, John, you got to kind of talk slow and take all day to do stuff. So I got in that mode. So anyway, well, thanks everybody for being here. How's everybody doing?
Good, thanks.
Good. Awesome. Well, welcome. Hey, a couple things. One is I am in charge today and I am running things. So if things screw up, I'm the only one to blame. Brandon, unfortunately, his dad passed away yesterday. He's off kind of going back to Boston. So our thoughts are with him. And then Catherine's on vacation. So if I screw up the breakout sessions today, it's all on me. So I think we should definitely should we start off by going to breakout?
Absolutely.
That's
Okay,
good.
let's
I
try
have to
it. Let me
I have
see
to
if I
comment,
can-
by the way, Dean Bosch's video system is really badass. I'm used to having the craziest camera on this call, but that's you're looking seriously good today, Dean.
I know Dean is the best at that, man. Okay, so here I go. I'm gonna let's see. We got 16 rooms. I'm gonna a bit help. Okay, here we go. Enjoy. All right, all rooms are closed. How did it go? Everybody doing good?
I got the lotto, man.
What's that?
I got the lotto. Got
Yeah.
all showed up in my room. It was a highlight of my year.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, super cool. Well, good. Well, thanks for again for being here again this week. Hey, so just wanted to kind of give you an update on a lot of things going on. So first of all, super excited that Balaji and I talked to Mike Tushman. And, you know, Mike's one of the leaders of the organizational behavior practice at HBS, and he and I just wrote a case study on Deloitte Pixel for HBS. And so he was super psyched to actually teach that case study to the group. And so we're going to have that on the 27th. That's going to be the activity for August 27th. I'm sure he'll be putting Balaji on the spot, but you guys will have the chance to ask Balaji all kinds of intimate questions about what went down. So we'll make sure we get you the case study beforehand. It's about 20 pages and you'll get a chance to read it and check it out. So anyway, it should be fun. Put it on your calendars. It's going to be a really fun experience. I love I've gotten a chance to sit in on some HBS classes and I was the subject of a case study, and it was fun, but a little bit unnerving when the whole class is asking you questions about why you made the dumb decisions you made. So anyway, and then Chris Stanton couldn't join today, but I know he's running a Future of Work webinar on the 17th of September. So look for that. We'll make sure you guys get that info out. And I'm going to be on a panel with some really interesting people. So that should be really great. So the second thing I wanted to chat a little bit about was the Global Summit. If you guys remember, we were going to do a Global Summit in October in Boulder here, but obviously that's not going to happen, you know, physically. So we're talking about doing it virtually, and I just kind of wanted to have a little discussion about that. But to kick off the discussion, Diane, I wanted to call on you because you were kind of instrumental in the MIT Platform Institute discussion. I think that came out really well. It sounded like it was really powerful. And then if anybody else is on the call, Upwork's, you know, Future of Work happened a couple days ago. So I guess that was really successful as well. Brandon went to that. So Diane, do you want to describe a little bit about what happened at the MIT Platform Summit?
Sure. Thanks, John. So I actually, how many folks actually attended that? Did anyone plug in? No? All right, I'll shoot out the link to the recording because there was some really great perspective there. But it's an annual platform summit hosted by MIT, and my partners at the Platform Strategy Institute kind of co-fund that, co-sponsor that, and really we just they brought in dignitaries from the platform space, people who are really scaling platform operations, platform business models, to share their perspective about what it takes to launch a platform business model or transition a traditional business to a platform operation. And the latter of which is almost more of a challenge because you have to keep it on the rails with your existing business model, but figure out how to best and most effectively make that shift to a platform operation. So there were some really good insights in there for digital natives and for traditional business operations, depending on kind of what your perspective is. And then also, our Platform Strategy Institute had just completed a pretty deep dive on a very large database of platform job postings, a little over 11,000 job postings. We analyzed what people are looking for, who's hiring platform talent, and what are some of the trends that are informing kind of career paths in the platform space. And so one of my partners walked through the results of that analysis, and it looks like the hiring community still is trying to figure out kind of what they're looking for when they're posting roles for platform talent. But if you look across the aggregate landscape, there are very clear career paths beginning to emerge in that space. So interesting insights. I'll find the link and send it out to the team, or I'll share it with the OA team, and
Great.
post it out.
Yeah, thanks. And if I'm right, the conference turned into a 5-hour conference, and you guys had some music, and that was kind of the format. Was the format successful in your mind?
It was. We were able to reach a much broader audience than we could if it was in person. And we're actually they're thinking about next year perhaps creating industry specific, basically creating subsets of the Platform Strategy Institute for digital natives or traditional incumbents or industry sector based discussions, so healthcare, financial services, et cetera. So that format's going to evolve, but the digital format was a big success.
Great. Did anybody go to the Upwork Work Without Limits conference this week? No.
I did, John.
Yeah, Balaji, how was it?
It was good. I think the speakers were really good. It wasn't interactive much. I mean, there was a place, like a little chat box that was always visible where you can ask questions and seem to have a conversation, but it seemed more like the questions were directed at the speaker versus among the people, which I think is if you do this virtually, I think there should be a greater connectivity among the participants, not just one-on-one conversation with the speaker. I don't think they did breakouts and team outs separately, but I think it was a sleekly done conference, well received, good speakers. I think there's a few things that we could do better.
Yeah, great. That's great feedback. Yeah, one of the things I was thinking about for our conference was to do the breakout that we do, but do kind of 2 or 3 back to back. Is like, if you walk into a reception area, you see somebody and talk to them for a second, then you turn your head and there's somebody else you want to talk to, and just to get everybody to know each other. So there's some mechanisms that we're gonna try. But Balaji, as you guys know, Deloitte was is planning on sponsoring it. We're going to sponsor the physical conference, and so Balaji and I are working on kind of the format and what the conference could be. So anybody who would love to have input into the conference, please, let me know and we'll get you involved. And I think it's important that we kick off this new organization that we're creating there, that we have a chance to, hear from some of the people doing the really interesting research out there, and, anything else that on anybody's mind. So anybody else on thoughts for the conference? No? Okay.
And I think maybe just reach out to me afterwards, John. So like a lot of, I used to run the conference business.
Yeah.
So just give me a call.
Yeah.
Or just a broader question to anybody, if in the last couple of months post-COVID, if they attended any interesting or highly innovative virtual conferences that they participated in and what made them cool. Love to see if there are any thoughts there.
Yeah, so this is Ashir. Again, I'm setting up for a conference at the end of September, October, not my own personal one, but with Twilio. But, again, I think shrinking the formats and making it as interactive as possible is what I'm seeing that's tending to work very well. So even if there was keynote type things, instead of an hour-long speech, 20 minutes, and then really into discussions. I think those are, and I think Sheila is just calling out breakouts are critical, right? Again, I think that is 100%. The more engagement you can get with the folks, the more people walk away finding value in it.
Yeah, I love that.
John, one of the things that I've been seeing, and I've done it 2 times to build on what Ashir's saying, is 9 minutes. Actually doing that TED Talk type of format, but even shorter,
right,
where it's like super concentrated and it's like 9 minutes. It keeps the energy up. And if you put something in between those 9 minutes, like if you had sorry, there's noise, but if you had like music in between, or you had like an artist or something entertaining in between those 9 minutes, because it's very much about keeping the energy. So
Yeah, I love that, Paul. That's a great idea. I spoke at TEDx conference a couple of years ago, and they actually had 3 different formats. They'd gotten rid of the 18-minute standard. They did 12 minutes, 12 minutes, 9 minutes, and 3 minutes. And I thought that was a really, really good way to go. I mean, it feels like, there's so much stuff we could do. One of the things that came across when I was talking to somebody about it is, most of these conferences are 5 to 6 hours. I think the platform conference, was 5 hours. The, Work Without Limits was 6 hours. Somebody suggested a lot like our design sprint to have, have it over 2 days, but have it only 3 hours each day to give people a break. So that's, if anybody has any thoughts or ideas, like we're in the middle of co-creating that and really, really need your input. So also I saw that Chuck, thanks for the question. Yeah, we need to make a list of all the relevant industry, conversations that are happening. And so we'll make sure that happens. Cool. Well,
can I just add one thing there, John, on the sort of practicalities of it? So I did participate in the Upwork for a very short period of time because it began at 9:30 p.m. in India. So, it's just kind of not feasible to be doing it for 6 hours. But the great thing is that they've got the whole thing recorded. And so I've gone back to it and then spent 2 sort of chunks of an hour and a half each going back in and looking at the thing. So again, getting that recorded and making it accessible, I think, is key.
Great. No, I think that's, for sure. I mean, we want to record everything so that anybody can go back to anything. I see there's, some other good comments. I'm not able to keep up with all the comments, so I apologize and highlight those, but make sure you guys keep up with the comments because there's some really good stuff going on the sideline as well. Okay, cool. So I've done some work and let's see, Diane and Rich and I had a good meeting about organizational structure last week. I got some other folks on the committee that I need to get involved with. But first I wanted to just engage with Brian Cave, which is the law firm. There's a guy who's an expert at, creating nonprofits and connecting them, being able to move them out of a for-profit situation. So the thing I met with them yesterday for a while. The thing we're contemplating is creating a 501c6, which is a trade organization. And then we'll create a 501c3, which is a foundation that folks can, put donations towards. There have been a couple big, organizations that have, from their foundations, have suggested they want to invest in the future of work and invest in the organization that we're creating. So one way to do that and really, direct their dollars. So we're in the midst of that. There's a lot of little things that we've got to get done there. I think that I'll make sure that I update the committee that we've got, but anybody else who has any questions as we set stuff up, just please feel free to shoot the questions. And, I was thinking about on the working groups, I know I got, thanks Chuck and Alp for your questions on what are we doing on the work groups. I think we should, let's look at those again and we can start self-organizing, but let's really talk about next steps on those. I want to make sure that we really get focused and don't try to do too much stuff at once. But there's been some great participation and people have really jumped in. If you haven't jumped into anything, let me know. And I'll reach out to each one of the groups and start talking about organizational structure. And as far as meetings, that can start getting going. I think that, one of the things we talked about last week and one of the things that I've tested with a few experts in the field is this idea of, really focusing on accreditation and education to start with, right? And then really focusing on, what are the standards going to be for accreditation? I know, as I said last time, Brian's been kind enough to want to lead that and put together the working group on that. And then under the education, we'll have certainly the accreditation or not the certification, the kind of marketing, awareness, and the advocacy. So we'll kind of be focusing on those 4 things. I really want to stay focused so we can get the biggest, momentum along the way as we can. So, but as part of the talk with the lawyers, the big question was, what's the name? And as you guys, if you guys have seen that, I threw out a document the last couple of weeks just with a naming document in the last email, and it's been around. So take a look at those names. We'll kind of, add some. From there, we're going to actually cut those names down and we'll put it out to some kind of voting for everybody to kind of lean into and be able to participate in that. Has everybody gotten a copy of that and seen it? Yeah. Okay, good. All right. On the manifesto, really appreciate all the comments on the manifesto. And I think we're getting pretty close. One of the things I love is the idea of that, you know, and Dean, you were the one that brought it to, you know, my attention, the whole Agile manifesto. And I want to create a, you know, as we create this site and come up with the name, put the manifesto up, but also create a signature for everybody who's been a participant in creating this. So just being able to create signature space for everybody and links to their LinkedIn to see that it's a movement just beyond a few people. So that's something we're working on. Certainly, I think back to Jerry Wynn's idea of what are the right metrics. There's lots of good ideas in there, and I think one of the things we need to do is kind of sort out what we want to, how we want to do things and what we want to do to make sure that we get the right kind of metrics for the group. And I think there was some good stuff from Marcelo on, you know, maybe we should have some metrics for 2025 and some for 2030, but both kind of medium term and long-term vision. So any questions on the naming or manifesto that you guys have, or any thoughts that you guys have? Nothing? Dean, no comments?
John, one of the things I've been thinking about, and I know that you love, I think you like the word new work. But one of the things that's really been resonating as I talk to companies, because I've been trying a bunch of different things over the past couple of weeks.
Yeah, I love it.
Is how they think of this, and new makes it sound hard. And in a lot of ways, this is just a digital transformation of contingent work programs as independent work, you know, increases. And I know that's not a sexy name, but when you talk to a large organization, they understand their contingent program. They understand digital transformation. They understand the rise of contractors and independent work. And so, you know, I was thinking a lot. I was like reading the names and stuff. And one of the things to consider is not to try to make it approachable and not yet another new thing, or you know, it's put it in language that is what they're working on anyway, and then make them, you know, the audience, the hero of the idea. Anyway, I was just struggling with the word new, because independent work is not new. Like, freelancers have been around for forever. And so anyway, I just wanted to provide that feedback, because it's feedback I got from the, I did a Vodafone thing for Alp, and that was the feedback I got. Like, hey, just talk to me in language I know. So I'm redoing my deck based on that feedback, my keynote. So you might want to consider that.
I love that.
I can't help but think that, you know, when you through that kind of lens, you know, is it really new, or are we setting modern work standards? So basically anyone who's not adopting this is actually the old versus saying we're the new, if that makes sense. And it makes people feel like that they need to kind of adopt these best practices so they're current, you know, and versus, again, implying it's something that's coming up. It's really, we're trying to set the standard for today. Yeah, no, I think that's super important. Hey, Kirsten, you and I had early on, we had some great, you know, dialogue around this whole idea of changing culture. And I know you're really, you know, that's where you spend your day all day long, along with Freddie and some other folks on the call. But any thoughts on names and how we do things because I think what's important, right, is I mean, what it harkens back to me when it is kind of, and you remember it, both Freddie and Kirsten and other people in the marketing world, you know, there used to be advertising, and then to make it sound different, it was digital advertising. And then all of a sudden now it's advertising again, right? And so it seems to happen a lot, right? It's like you need some kind of separation, because clients don't understand that if you say advertising, they think radio and TV back in the day when that separated, just to kind of get the separation, and then, but always with the intention of it's all work, right? It's all advertising. And that digital gets dropped after a while. I think that's what's going to happen to me, honestly, around digital transformation, that it's just going to be transformation, right? All of us have to just transform things. So any thoughts?
I mean, yes, and a lot of thoughts, no answers.
Right.
As always. I think, you know, I've been away for 4 weeks, so feeling very kind of fresh and coming in and reading things, and
I love it.
Anyways, so what I pick up on, I think that point is super well made, and I think no matter what, new language is always hard. And I think that for anyone, and probably most people on this call, that constantly try to engage in what is like not necessarily just building a business case to incrementally improve the past, but really trying to create something different or that breakthrough. It's the balance between how do we incorporate enough new language, I think, John, exactly as you said, to indicate that there is actually something different, but still make it, I think, going back to the point, approachable. So how do you make it so that it doesn't feel intimidating, that there's still opportunity to participate and it's not going to be totally overwhelming, but at the same time, what signals or indications do we introduce so that it does feel like there's this is a markedly new juncture, so to speak. There's the new inflection point happening, and so that's like the macro perspective around, you know, the balance of language. And there's different ways that you can, you know, rely on naming and visuals and descriptions, where it's like a name can sound very provocative, but how you could describe it can feel much more rooted in other language, or a name can feel much more standard, but then how it's packaged can feel much more, you know, fresh. So there's all these different ways to play, I think, in terms of trying to find that right balance. The names in and of themselves, I think that there's like an interesting question around it really goes back to the goal and who are the people that we think that we're talking to and where do we think growth's going to come from. You know, do we want this to feel very institutional and very formal and structured, or should it also feel more human and open and kind of colloquial? Like what type of language and design language do we want to use throughout this, both verbally and visually and everything else? So it's just, again, comments and questions to all the good points that have been made.
Yeah, I love that. I love that guidance. Thanks. You're always it's so wonderful to have you participate, because you always elevate the conversation to think about things on a more macro level, to kind of the intent behind the words, right? The intent behind the design, and matching kind of new language with older language and the hierarchy of that and the hierarchy of design. Those are all really, really good points, and points well taken. And we'll, you know, certainly as we dig into it, get everybody's participation. Hey, Mikio, you're new to the call. I think you came last week. Mikio has been doing this work for a long time as a marketer from J&J, and we had an amazing conversation last week. Any thoughts on how to, you know, like use language to, you know, in the context of a name for the adoption of these new practices?
Hi guys. Thank you for inviting me for this call. No, I think you know, right now it's more of spending some time, you know, ideating and building top of ideas to make sure that it has some kind of sustainable name that, you know, that everyone can feel related to. Yeah, I know. I joined the 15 minutes late, so I missed the earlier personal conversations. But yeah.
Well, we're super psyched to have you in the group. So thanks for joining, and thanks again for the amazing conversation we had last week, for sure. Really great. Steve, you know, how about you? What are your thoughts on it?
Yeah. So part of me wonders if we need to let the organics work out a little bit here, you know, because trying to narrow it too quickly, I think there's a little bit, and I'm sure the marketing folks know better than I do on this stuff, but part of me wants to use several terms for a little bit to see what starts to stick and resonate, because I have a feeling the worker side is a little bit different from the consumer side. So I don't know. It's interesting, because I know we want something catchy. We want something everyone understands. I think what's obvious from kind of the conversation is that's really hard. Yeah. Like that's so I like continuing to play with it. I don't mind us kind of narrowing it, but somehow to keep it open and keep the conversation to where we still let that ebb and flow. But again, I defer to the folks that specialize in that. Probably not the engineer. So
who else has some thoughts on this?
Let me chime in here.
Yeah, Jerry, that'd be awesome.
I like the idea of keeping it open for a while, but I will actually challenge the idea of that new is too radical. I would go even further. I would talk about the future of work. You need something aspirational. You need something that will accommodate those who are doing it today to do a little more of this, but then also to try to rethink the organization. I think this relates directly to the vision and how do we position the vision. And do we want like incremental change? So people will move from using 1% open innovation to 2%, or we really want people to, especially CEOs, to start thinking about what is the nature of my organization if I start incorporating and building into it open innovation and open talent, and what are the implications for traditional employment? And I think related to this, if we want to go this route, one thing we have to think about in terms of workflow is perhaps a workflow of the future of the organization. What is the future organization given this? Which we're focusing too much on the other side, but not enough, I think, with the workflows we have. What are the implications to CEOs who are interested in rethinking their organization?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, Jerry. I just am finishing the book that Diane and I were talking about, Brave New Work, Aaron Dignan's book, and find it really, really interesting. It's very aspirational, on kind of new systems. And Diane, have you been digging into the book too? At all? Not yet. Yeah, it's really great. It's really aspirational. I just wonder that it's so radical. It's like for most organizations to reinvent their operating system is a really, really difficult thing to do. And so I think that's hard. Kristen, it sounds like you have something. Were you going to say something?
I was just going to say, I think, I think it just then again, it goes back to the core objectives and almost like the business model for change, where it's, where's there the bulk of interest coming from today and where is it in the future? Mm-hmm. And, you see, and, everyone on the call is very much, this can be a mechanism to think about marginal improvements, but for very still similar outcomes. But every time that I start having conversations around growth and more kind of organizational, obviously like transformation, and recognizing that there's going to be new practices stood up, it's almost like we want to do that in a way that's different. And that's almost where it goes back to Diane's point. It's really, really hard to do that full system change, but there are pockets of the organization where change can happen because it's not as connected to the core, but it's almost been set up more as a bet. And I think it's just understanding that it goes back to like the core root in terms of where conversations are coming from, and where do we want to provoke, or is it, really the appetite to just get the conversation going in a way that feels more accessible. But yeah.
No, that's great. Great input.
Playing a little bit on Kristen, what she was saying. I mean, again, one of the things that keeps coming up is, balanced workforce, right? That sort of comes up at the Fortune 500s. And this is one of the levers, right? Mm-hmm. That gives you the ability to control it. And it's, it's not it's not an on-off switch. It's, I need it in certain parts of my organization to test the waters and then sort of, expand beyond there. And so this is one of those tools in your toolbox that helps you get to that balanced workforce.
Yeah, I love it. That's a really good thing. Hey, Mike Morris, I actually used your name. I don't know if you're still on. I disappeared from the video, so I stepped away. Yeah, there you are. I talked about you yesterday on Clinton's podcast. So Mike and Topcoder have a great podcast that Clinton, their marketing guy, runs called Upriser. So check it out if you haven't. It's really good. But anyway, we were just kind of reminiscing that I kind of started in this in 2002, 2001. You did too. It was like we were doing kind of this work before there was even a name for it. So kind of with that kind of longitudinal history, like any thoughts on naming? You've seen it all and heard it all for 20 years now.
I can say we screwed up on naming a lot of things. Mess put something in the chat earlier. Mess, put that up again. We used the site to come up with the Upriser. I actually love the Upriser name. Upriser was meant to be our kind of flagship event to go along with the Topcoder Open. Topcoder Open was community, but Upriser was going to be kind of our thought leadership event just around the space. It still will be. We just obviously had to cancel it. So we're doing, we're going to be doing a series of blogs and podcasts, and then we'll do a virtual event sometime in the fall. But we use that site Squad Help to come up with the name. So I'd say maybe use something like that. But yeah, John, I remember, back when we had, 2001, when we founded Top Coder, there's nothing like this. I always joke, like, we go into a Morgan Stanley meeting and they're like, wait a second, you're using people from all over the globe that, that you don't really know. And it would, they looked at you like you were crazy, but we've come a long way since then.
That's great. Well, Squad Help, that looks like a cool site. So thanks for that. I think that's something we might want to do to kind of narrow things down and really check that out. Hey, John Healy, you've seen it all too from the Kelly side of things, but Paul's good point. Like, contingent work is a really good, it's really important. Companies have been doing it forever, and they have a established practice. Any thoughts from your perspective?
They do and they don't. If you look at all the words we have for outside labor, so we have consultants and we have contractors, we have service providers and independent contractors, and start going down the list. And what you see is that companies have created separate policies associated to each of those types of workers, because they found out I didn't like the policy for consultants, so this person's a contractor. So corporations just create words to create excuses around or workarounds around the policies. Is something that's out there. So I think we have to be careful that we don't create a new category, but we create the opportunity to simplify.
Yeah,
is what we're hunting for. What organizations are struggling with, especially if you look at large enterprises, and David Swift, please add as you look at this from a procurement perspective. But if you're a large organization spending $1 billion in third-party labor, you have multiple category managers who are covering each of these, and they generally don't talk to one another until it rolls up. And if you're going to add in the HR organization, the whole pieces don't come together till you're at a COO level. So you need to understand the complexity that we're walking into an organization within, and you don't want to get yourself boxed into one bucket or another, because the moment they can put you into a category, you are now restricted in terms of the scope of what you can engage in. And I think that's maybe the risk of what's there. So if our intent is to engage with the enterprise and get the enterprise to embrace what's there, I think we've got to really get into the enterprise organization and talk to them a little bit about what prevents you from being boxed in. And usually it's having a relationship with the end user stakeholder. So the CFO picks who they want to do things. The head of marketing said, I'm not using any of these contingent suppliers and VMS tools that send me a bunch of text. I need to see someone's portfolio. So I'm going around the program. What you have is just not fit for purpose. So it's the line management who tends to have the authority to either stay within scope or move without it. What I think is fascinating in what's happening right now is that industry is going through this phenomenon where for the last 15 years, they've focused on efficiency, cutting cost and getting as streamlined as you possibly can. And now they're being tasked with looking at resilience because their supply chains, whether it's of people or products, have been broken. So there's a piece in here that offers access to resilience in terms of the flexibility and the adaptability of dealing with labor and getting work done in different ways that can really help out. So I don't have the answer for what it is. I do think that there's a marketing person somewhere out there who can pick the pretty word that everyone can get behind, but that's not me.
Yeah, that's awesome, John.
John, can I just add something to John's point? One of the things that I've been playing around with is the idea of work 4.0 or 4.0.
Right.
And one of the things that appeals to me about that is that it immediately places it within a bigger context and one which people are broadly kind of familiar with. And therefore, I think it reduces some of that kind of explanation about why is it that we're calling this and what is it that we're talking about. But it also speaks to some of the things that John Healy just spoke about in terms of resilience and abundance and other good things. So I wonder whether that's a potential contender.
Yeah, certainly. I love that. And, you know, in the context of all the great work that's done around 4.0, you know, industrial. What's the main moniker? Industrial 4.0 or what's the
Industry 4.0?
Industry
Business 4.0.
Yeah. Yeah. So I totally agree. There's already a movement there and it means something, and this certainly fits into it. Hey, David, any thoughts? I'm curious, especially with John's comments and your thoughts.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm just a lowly procurement person, not a marketeer, but I just think I wouldn't get too hung up on the name. The name is, in my opinion, is not that important. It's much more important to articulate what this organization is about.
Right.
I'll give you an example. I worked for a company called PricewaterhouseCoopers Consulting years ago, and for about a week or two, they decided to call themselves Monday. I don't know if you remember that. No. They probably paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to come up with the name Monday, and somebody thought it was a great idea. Now, what's that got to do with professional services? I don't know. But I don't think the name is so important. It's really that you have to have a story behind it. And you can call yourself anything because, you know, once people understand the story, the name really becomes irrelevant. It's just a tag. So I think I would spend more time figuring out what we're all about, what we want to do, what we want to achieve, and come with a name, sure, whatever, but I wouldn't get too hung up on the name myself.
Yeah, that's a good point. I've seen certainly lots of organizations that, you know, become abbreviated and just use that, you know, the initials, and then all of a sudden, you know, 50 years later, the original words don't mean anything at all, right? Like but the actual UAW or whatever becomes much more substantial. So
I also worked for a company, a Finnish company called Kone, and Kone in Finnish means machine, and they make elevators and escalators, right? So they just call themselves Machine. It's not a very sexy name, but it's well known in the industry now, and anybody outside of Finland doesn't know that it means machine, right?
Yeah, no, that's interesting.
John, can I ask a question?
Yeah, for sure. Hey, James.
I'm not sure, you know, as we were talking, I was rereading the manifesto, and the word work to me still has kind of a 1930s, you know, muscle and stone crushing kind of a connotation.
Right.
And so I think the challenge to the group is to think about this organization in terms of how far into the future we're thinking. And when you think about the future of what we're calling work, you can't ignore AI and robotics. So I think we have to ask ourselves an essential question, which is this a human-based organization, or will this organization certify work globally for any robotic creation that exists in the year 3020?
Mm-hmm.
Have we?
I think that's a really good point. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I mean, some of my thinking was really, you know, I was, you know, and Paul, you and I spent so many hours, you know, when you were doing your book talking. And one of the things I love about Paul's perspective is that one of the keys to making any new model successful is this taskification, right? And I know from my own experience when I was at Crispin Porter Bogusky and at Havas, when a client would come and they would say, I have to solve this problem, my mindset was, oh, I need a creative director for 3 months and a strategy director for 3 months. I never asked, like, well, wow, that's an interesting problem. What are the tasks that need to be done to accomplish that problem? And then, you know, if there are 40 tasks, maybe the creative director I was thinking about hiring would be really awesome at 20, okay at 10, and really bad at 10. Wouldn't it be better to have a much more open talent strategy as an answer? And I think that's, to me, at the core of this question of, like, to me, one of the big solves is helping organizations be comfortable with taskifying the jobs that need to be done, right? Because if that's done, then not only is it better for open talent, but it's also better for AI. It's also better for the future. It's also better for transformation of the organization. Paul, I mean, you were the originator of the whole taskification thing. Any thoughts on that?
I think it goes back to what John Healy was saying. And, you know, there are different types of employment constructs being used to solve these problems. But I had a really good conversation with a friend of mine who's in procurement at a large retailer, and we were talking about SOWs, right? And in theory, the concept of an SOW and project-based work, and we were talking about, hey, what does it mean to put a project into a freelance platform versus writing an SOW? And so that just makes me think back to the taskification of, if you want to find the right expert, whether it's a crowd platform or a freelance platform, how does an organization in their language think of that? And that's how I think of taskification in general, right? An SOW is a way that you communicate sort of the tasks that need to be completed. So I'm trying to take this language and this thing that we all believe and put it into language, John, to your point, that organizations can understand, like, hey, I want to do this now. What does that mean? Without them having to translate what we believe into something that they live every day, right? That complexity that John was talking about.
Yeah,
and I think
that's easier said than done. I think I completely agree. That is such a different mindset, and the idea of taskifying and biting off chunks into or biting off a big project into smaller chunks is certainly not uncommon. I mean, that's how they build airliners, right? No one builds an SOW unless you're Boeing for one big airliner. There's thousands of people who have discrete tasks to create a plane. The problem is that taking that step is it's a difficult skill for people to wrap their minds around. I mean, heck, it's hard enough for some people to write a process flow. But I completely agree that taskification and the breaking up of the job into its underlying parts is where the future lies. And maybe that's part of the education curriculum is maybe we need to create taskification as a work stream to educate people on how to do that and create tools and strategies to do that.
Yeah, otherwise you end up what John was talking about of just getting a managed service, right? Oh, well, I just need a person. Put this person in this cube and they will do work. And you don't ever start reaching out into the freelance marketplace. That's why I came up with it.
I think you're right. I just think it's a BHAG to get people to really think that way as opposed to discrete outputs.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. Who's read the book Machine Platform Crowd? Have you guys checked that out? Yeah, I mean, to me, it's one of my favorite books, right? Because it's an amalgamation of all this stuff, right? Who are the guys? Mark Van Alstyne, right? Diane, who else wrote that? No, it wasn't Mark. It was.
No, it's Andy McAfee.
Oh yeah, Andy McAfee. Yeah, from MIT. Yeah.
And Eric Bjornholson. Yeah.
Right. Who's moving from MIT to Stanford now? Yeah, right.
Yep.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the other Andy went the other way.
Oh, he went from Stanford to MIT.
Or Harvard to MIT. Yeah.
Harvard to MIT. Yeah. A great book, and I think it's it kind of ladders up to something bigger, right? It's like where does talent fit in the bigger picture of kind of this transformation of organizations? It's certainly one piece, right, of this digital transformation conversation, and certainly the place we need to focus on. But we can't. I think back to your comments, Kirsten, we can't forget that it's a bigger, it solves a bigger problem for organizations. This kind of, this transformation.
John, as you bring that up, there's one of the points that they bring out in that I think is a risk for us of kind of getting into the boil the ocean side of things.
Yeah, for sure. I totally agree with that. I tend to think about, at least in my experience with kind of marketing strategy, is coming up with the name that gets the attention, but then really driving home the point in the description and in the subtitle or whatever it is. But just, the name needs to be catchy enough that people are like, what's that? I need to check it out. So, wow, this has been a really great discussion. It's taken us the whole hour. Really appreciate it. Thanks. Anybody else have any thoughts on it before?
John, quick question.
Yeah.
Why not, given the discussion, it seems that we really have to focus more on the vision and sharpen the vision. But once we have it, why not go and create an open competition for the best name?
Yeah.
Why do we have to come with the name here? Let's create an open competition, but we have to specify a clear vision that we all agree on.
Right. I totally agree with that. That's a great suggestion, Jerry. And I love that organization that Mass put up there. It's what was it again? Oh, Squad Help. So that I'll check that out and see what we can come up with and see if there's
folks on here. We should be able to put a brief. Effectively, it's a brief, right? So give a little bit of a brand strategy and then crowdsource it. This is ripe for. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, great. Okay, good suggestions. Hey, I know we're running out of time. The last thing I had on my list was just work streams. People who are interested in being involved in work streams, continue to sign up, and then next week I'll reach out to all the work streams on individual emails, and we'll start getting going on specific tasks. And again, I'll on the organizational structure, that's kind of my big focus right now is as we come together, I'll make sure we get a committee meeting next week and just talk about where we are and what's going on. Anybody else have anything before we kind of close out the week?
John, to sign up for the work streams, how should we do it? Send you a mail, or is there another means of doing that?
There's a document, and I'll make sure that I get the document out in a follow-up email. So, but there's a work stream document with description and then place for.
I just put a name in that.
Yeah. No, that. Thanks, David. No, that'd be really great. So cool. I think that's it. One last story that I thought was super interesting culturally, and Paul, I'm sure you noticed it this morning because it's in your area. But did you guys see the news that REI, the outdoor equipment retailer, they just built a huge new 8-acre campus.
I pass it every day.
Yeah, and so right? Yeah, they were going to move it in June, and they just announced this morning they're not going to move in. They're going to sell it. They're going to be 100% remote from their headquarters.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's culturally connected, right? I love REI, and I love the fact that their mission is to get people outdoors and enjoying the outdoors. So, but I thought that was a big move by a very culturally aware and kind of early adopter organization that's going to reverberate through other organizations. So awesome. Well, I love you guys. Thanks so much for taking the time. It's such an honor, such a great conversation, and all really good stuff. So have a great weekend, and we'll see you guys next week. Thanks again.
All the
best.